What was the worst date you ever had? Some girl bragged about how she ditched her last date in the middle of their date, and just how funny it was. I went to the bathroom and never came back. She was hot, but not that hot. Tit for tat. You the real MVP. I got a date with a really handsome dude. Really handsome. Went to a restaurant. He saw a couple of friends and invited them to join us. Then he made me pay for it all. He drove us there and I couldn't walk home, so I had to ride back with him too. He took me to his apartment. For just a minute. Then he tried to force me to drink something, which I refused because I was afraid I was going to get date raped. He kept insisting and I kept refusing. He pushed me down onto the bed and started biting me. Hard. Really hard. I told him I didn't like it. He told me that I did like it. I told him to go f himself. I wanted to leave. So he made me walk home. It was 17 degrees and the middle of the night, but I still feel like I made the best decision. Asked out a friend of a friend. Picked her up and went to a restaurant. When we get there she mumbled something about being early, but it didn't make sense at the time. After about 15 minutes she asked when everyone else was arriving and specifically asked when a certain male friend of mine was going to be there. At that point I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts between us stating this was clearly intended as a date between the two of us. She shrugged and said she thought I was joking. Again she asked about my other male friend arriving. Basically drowning in the awkwardness, and again confirming no one else was coming. I drove her home. Probably the one where the guy brought his own food to the restaurant. Who does that? Once I went to meet a guy at a bar for drinks and sent a text to say,
I just got off the train, should be there in like 5 minutes.
He responded,
Great, we ordered you a drink already.
Turns out he was there with his mom who wanted to chaperone. We were both in our mid-20s. Less of a date, but I once met a guy in passing on the boardwalk by a beach, so I had sunglasses on. We talked for a while, honestly maybe 20 to 30 minutes of very upfront flirting, and he asked if I wanted to head to the bar to grab drinks. We stepped inside and I took off my sunglasses and he said,
Oh sorry, I didn't realize you were Asian.
And left. The first thing she said to me when we met up is,
You're short.
Damn. I usually don't hear this until the third date. Suicide by words. And we're short on time. Bye. Told this story before on a somewhat similar post, but also in hindsight, now that I look back at it, I think it's hilarious. Met this guy on Tinder, go figure. He took me to my favorite Korean barbecue restaurant. We were having a good time, chillin', eating, talking. Then, he started to get all nervous and jittery. I asked what was wrong and he didn't even make up a stupid excuse, just straight up told me his girlfriend was sitting a few rows back from me. I guess she had seen him because a few moments later she was up at our booth, yelling at him about,
How could you do this to me? And I thought you loved me.
etc. etc. I didn't really know what to expect from a Tinder date, but I also really was enjoying my Bulgarian brisket. The restaurant didn't provide to-go boxes, so I basically had dinner and a show till I finished up my dinner. This place is expensive, and my wine, and then slowly but surely dipped out. They didn't even notice me leaving either. My favorite part though, was the girlfriend's date coming up and asking,
What's going on here, babe?
The manager and a few waiters couldn't get them to calm down, that's how bad the arguing was. I ordered my Uber and saw the girlfriend's date vaping, I'm assuming also waiting for his Uber, outside as well. It was a weird but eventful night. Good meal though. Sounds like they deserved each other. I feel like this is the start of a rom-com between two side pieces as they wait for their Uber. I hope to one day witness this glorious event in the wild. I'm a type 1 diabetic, aka, not the type you get from weight or diet. My pancreas basically just died when I was a kid. She turned out to be a spiritual healer who essentially suggested that most diabetics have a certain bitterness in their life that made them turn out this way, and that I could cure my diabetes by just opening my mind. Check please. That's no healer. That's a straight up, tone deaf, victim blaming. I'm sorry you went through that. A girl invited me out for dinner, had me pay for everything, didn't even thank me, and then as we left the restaurant she told me about how she pretty much never buys food or drinks herself, because she knows that a guy will always offer sooner or later. I'm perfectly happy with paying for dinner if I've invited someone out, but usually I think it's best to at least offer to split. But, was she hot? Was it worth it? She was okay, and no. It wasn't worth it. I ditched her after she was going on about getting guys to pay for everything. The date that crushed me the most was actually a really nice date. We had great chemistry, tons in common and were getting along really well. Towards the end of the date I reached over and held her hand, and she held mine back, and when we both left we agreed to arrange a second date and had a really nice kiss. Then she stopped replying to messages with no warning.
Lol, that would had crushed my little heart.
Got to a Tinder date, she had me park in the underground parking garage. I parked, and after that task is when I saw her in real life, for the first time. She was so intensely, unbelievably fat compared to her pictures. It's like she photoshopped all her Tinder pictures and put on a ton of makeup. She has to approach me for me to realize that she was the person I was even there for. Unrecognizable. I don't mean to be a d***, but if you were in my position you would have done the same thing, I assure you. I asked her to do the code and let me out of the campus parking garage. Noped to f*** out. Learned a valuable lesson that day. Blind date. We had been texting and it seemed like we had a bit in common, and I was interested. He sent me a pic that was obviously taken many years ago and he lied about his height, by a lot. Not a big deal, because I'm not shallow about appearances, but come on man. Then he tells me he knows a great little restaurant in LA that has the best lunch. He was talking it up a lot, and I was excited thinking it was some neat hidden gem deli. He took me to a Denny's. I ordered a veggie burger and he stood up and yelled,
"Are you a vegetarian? What do you eat for breakfast?"
loudly enough that everyone there turned and looked. I told this girl I was really good at bowling because I thought I was. I ended up getting a 36. On our way to the car I ran up a down escalator because I thought it would be funny. Halfway up I tripped and split my knee open on one of the stairs. I told her I was fine as I was limping, dragging blood behind me. When we got back to her house I asked her if she'd like to go on another date and she just said,
I'll pass.
And she got out of the car and I never saw her again. We went to see Mamma Mia. She took her friend to see it with us. She wanted to stay behind after the movie to make out. Her friend stayed and stared. Awkward dinner, she talked about the clinical term for butt cracks, came back to my place, and after staying the night complained about everything she could find wrong with the house. She had been in a sexually repressed relationship, so that was nice, but it only goes so far before the reality of the situation sets in, which was about 4 hours into the next day when she was still shadowing me walking through the mall, and complaining about my place to the point I seriously felt like I was being bullied. It was weird. So what is the clinical term for butt cracks? Asking the important questions. Gluteal fold. I got you. Coffee date a few years ago. She spent 95% of it on her phone. I made up an excuse and ended it early. The date lasted all of 30 minutes. Coffee dates may be cliché, but they're effective in their own way. That date was proof why. A week ago, I went to a trivia night with a girl on Tinder. She showed up with her sister, who turned out to be her 18-year-old daughter. And then started ordering drink after drink. I had to stop her, tell her I ain't paying for you getting shit-faced for your daughter to drive you home. That's f***ed up. Date ended shortly after that. Unmatched. Girl wanted to go to a Cardinals game to see her friend, says it's a date as well. Get there and see her friend, dude who was about to be shipped out to the Navy. They proceed to make out in front of me. Went out with a woman who kept talking about my accent and even interrupted me mid-sentence asking me to repeat certain words. In addition, she was a school teacher and told me about how she left a school because she didn't like working with autistic kids, and also turned out to be so computer illiterate that she didn't know about Wikipedia. Not sure if it even qualifies as a date, it was so lame. Met this girl on Tinder, and picked her up from her class at community college to get summer lunch. Awkward small talk quickly turned into her complaining about her family and past relationships. After lunch we walked around the mall for a bit just checking out random shops. Half the time we were together, she was on Tinder. After a while, she had me drop her off at Red Robin where she was getting picked up by a friend, probably just someone else from Tinder. Tie between having a first date with a man and his mum. And a date with a guy who used the tablecloth to wipe his mouth, and told me I had class because he liked my restaurant choice. The guy couldn't stop talking about his ex-girlfriend despite her having dumped him some time ago, 2 years, he was not in the least bit over her. When I declined an invitation for a second date he struggled to understand why I didn't want to experience a round two of him talking about his ex, at every feasible opportunity. I went out with this girl I met on Meet and we decided to go to a higher class bar. We ordered our beer and food and got talking and I slowly started to realize that she's most likely schizophrenic and the date went downhill from there. I decided to get shit-faced to at least make up for it and I got blackout drunk. Well, I woke up the next morning naked and in her bed, so I quickly and quietly get the hell out. When I get home I just feel really dirty, so I take a shower and as I'm about to get in I look in the mirror and see something black on my balls. She wrote in permanent marker her phone number on my balls. In permanent marker while I was sleeping. It took me 2 hours to get that off and a lot of vodka to try and forget everything. She didn't put out. So all your dates are bad, tears of laughter. 26th of November 2009. Everything I inherited from my father and all my possessions were burned in a rental storage box. My father had just died and I was moving. The company has never paid anything and I was insured. I only had a little bag with clothes and my phone left because I lived with my mother's house while renovating my new house. Half hour late, didn't say anything about it, talked only about herself, insisted on second date and how she was a good person. The second date was just as bad, still very late, talked about the concerts she'd go to, her family, and how her friend was away and she needed a backup person, who'd always be there if she was bored. She not even that pretty. I'm done, I hope she's taken the hint. Took her out for Thai food. Great conversation, great chemistry. On the way back to her dorm we're talking about a second date. We stop in front of the door, she fiddles with her keys instead of going right in, I go in for the kiss. She awkwardly dodges and says,
Listen, normally I would be all about that, but it's my boyfriend's birthday and I'm feeling kinda guilty.
Long story short, I decided it was best not to talk to her again. Wasn't necessarily the date, which was bad on its own, but the fact that she hung out in my parking lot for 2 hours after she dropped me off.
In case I changed my mind about doing something after dinner.
Like, in the hopes that you would want to hang out with her? Or to make sure you didn't go and do anything else without her? Either way it's creep town, just curious.
10:45 p.m, he in there playing Mario Kart without me. That lying bastard.
I think she wanted to bang you. But there are lines that need to be drawn here. Acting like a stalker is one of them. I went out with a guy that my roommate set me up with a few years ago. First, he was vocally irritated that I wore heels because it made him less taller than me. Note, he was still taller than me by a few inches, but just less taller. Dinner went alright, although we didn't have a whole lot in common. After dinner, we met back up with my roommate and her boyfriend and we all went to a house party of their friends. I basically knew no one. At the party, my date's, somewhat newly, ex-girlfriend was there. To summarize, she called me a whore, spilled my drink on me, threatened to fight me, told me she gave him herpes, left, came back an hour later looking for me, hugged me, grabbed my ass, and apologized and told me I was hot. So I guess it went pretty well by the end of the night. I went out for dinner and a movie with a guy. I tried to chip in money at both, but he insisted that he cover it all. At the end of the night, we're sitting in his car in the parking lot of the restaurant we had just eaten at, and he asks for a BJ saying,
I mean, I bought you dinner and took you to a movie, it's the least you can do.
Thankfully I lived nearby. I hopped out and walked home. Second date, you pay and demand he paints your kitchen. Is painting a woman's kitchen an innuendo I've never heard before? I'd paint her kitchen. I'd paint it real good. Like a periwinkle blue or an off-white shade. Oh. Yeah. I feel like it's an innuendo that's just been created. Whispers sensually in your ear. I'm going to cover your kitchen in a double coat of the finest, creamy white paint. I'll caress all four walls and the roof with my long, hard brush. And when I've left it out to dry for several hours, I'll make sure to bake a bun in your oven. Sounds like fair payment for covering the expenses of a second date to me. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and ring the notification bell.